Hello, this is Rick, and this is Burn After Reading. I just want to take this time to thank everyone who watched the last episode and subscribed. I'm not monetized. I have no plans to do so it's unlikely that the YouTube algorithm is going to pick up on my content. But I do appreciate everyone who shares my episodes. So if you're new and you like what you hear, please like and subscribe. It does help. So with that said, let's get on with it. On June 3rd of 1993, Jesse Misskelley Jr. was brought into the West Memphis police station at 10 a.m. for questioning. Jesse knew Damien Echols, who was suspected of being involved in the murders of Stevie, Christopher, and Michael, and the police were questioning anyone who knew him. Jesse wasn't the first to be interviewed, nor was he considered a suspect at the time. Now, before we get into that, let's address some misconceptions that is very popular in this West Memphis 3 advocate community. It is believed that Jesse had a lack of due process and wasn't read his Miranda rights. An example given is from a musician and actor named Henry Rollins, who told a radio interviewer in 2003, and I quote, "What was really interesting to me was the lack of due process that the 3 boys incarcerated did not enjoy and the lack of Miranda rights read to Jesse Misskelley. And I went, wow, that's not the way Americans should be treated." So, you see, inaccuracies like that are thrown into the echo chamber all the time in that West Memphis 3 community, and it drives me nuts. So before we get into Jesse's interview and interrogation, let's go over some facts about how Jesse's rights were not violated and that the West Memphis Police Department did it by the book. So number 1, Jesse's father, Jesse Misskelley Sr., spoke with Sergeant Mike Allen at 9:45 a.m. and again at 11:15 a.m. about the interview. Allen actually talked to Jesse Sr. first in the morning. Jesse Sr. then drove off and retrieved Jesse Jr. Then Allen and Jesse Jr. drove to the police station at 11:15 a.m. Jesse Sr. signed a waiver allowing police to give Jesse Jr. a polygraph exam. Number 2, West Memphis Police did in fact inform Jesse Jr. of his rights. Sergeant Allen read Misskelley his legal rights at around 11 a.m. and Misskelley initialed and signed a rights form. Detective Durham advised Misskelley of his rights again at 11:30 a.m. before conducting the polygraph exam, and Misskelley again initialed and signed a rights form. Now, the second form is not available online, but it was discussed and entered into evidence as State's Exhibit 11 during a court hearing on January 13th, 1994. At the beginning of the first tape-recorded confession, police again reminded Misskelley of his legal rights and reviewed and signed the rights form. So, there you go. And number 3, Jesse Jr. did in fact understand his legal rights because he was in fact in legal trouble before. Jesse Jr.'s lawyers tried claiming that Misskelley was incapable of reading or understanding his legal rights, and thus that his June 3rd, 1993 confession should be thrown out. Prosecutors countered that Misskelley had extensive experience dealing with law enforcement officials before June 1993, and that Misskelley had been Mirandaized and signed legal rights waivers on 4 previous occasions. Now that we have that factual understanding, let's move on. According to notes made by detectives Mike Allen and Brian Ridge, Jesse stated that he worked as a roofer on the day of the murders. After work, Jesse claimed that he went home and stayed home for the night. An interesting statement since he claimed later he was out of town wrestling at some event. This was the first of many inconsistent alibis made by Jesse or for Jesse. Jesse told the detectives that he had heard a rumor that Damien Echols and Robert Birch killed Michael Moore, Stevie Branch, and Christopher Byers. He said he didn't know Birch very well, but he knew Damien. He introduced Damien to Vicky Hutchinson. He went on to describe Damien's close relationship with Jason Baldwin. He said that they were always together and that Damien also had a pregnant girlfriend named Dominique Tier. Jesse also said that he always saw Damien at the local skating rink with friends Jason and another kid named Carl Smith. Jesse attempted to distance himself from Damien by calling him sick and that he drank or licked human blood. He made inconsistent statements about the last time he met or spoke to Damien. In one statement, he claimed it was 3 weeks, in another, it was 2 months. Suspicion started to mount on Jesse. Jesse was asked if he'd take a polygraph test, and he agreed. I mean, what could he say, right? If he says no, he looks suspicious. But then he thinks, maybe I can beat it. Now, after the polygraph test was conducted, Bill Durham told Brian Ridge and Chief Inspector Gary Gitchell that Jesse was lying his ass off. Now, I want to share my opinion that I don't find polygraphs very reliable. It's a big reason why they're not admissible in court. Still, it's an investigative tool, and sometimes the psychology that comes from it can help elicit a response. However, guilty people have passed polygraphs and innocent people have failed them, so I'm not using them as any kind of proof, but I will report on them as we go along, just to be fair. The detectives pushed harder, believing Jesse wasn't being truthful with them. They showed Jesse a photo of one of the boys on an autopsy table just to get a response, and they played a tape recording of a boy who eerily said, "Nobody knows what happened but me." The boy on the recording was Aaron Hutchinson, an 8-year-old boy who Jesse babysat for and who was friends with the 3 murder victims, and also was the son of Vicky Hutchinson. I don't want to get too off topic, but I felt Vicky, for the most part, played an unhelpful role in the investigation along with her son, something we'll discuss in later episodes. However, this recording was powerful because as far as Jesse knew, Aaron could have witnessed everything without knowing it at the time. Instead of being confused or appalled by the recording and professing his innocence, Jesse instead broke down crying and confirmed he was present during the murders. Jesse was interrogated for about 2 hours before confessing, and not the 12 hours as claimed by the filmmakers of the Paradise Lost series, or even the Innocence Project. They get it wrong on their website, showing they must be getting their information from unreliable sources. But I digress. Jesse arrived at the station at 10 a.m. and confessed at 2:20 p.m. Only a little over 2 hours of that time was actual interrogation. Jesse was initially vague and incorrect about a lot of details in his first confession. He even lied multiple times about the timing of the murders, about how the boys were tied and how they died. West Memphis 3 supporters in the defense would use this to prove Jesse was coerced into a confession. But look, the initial lies here were not due to that. Jesse had a reason to lie, and he explained so several times, and we will get into that later. For now, let me address some of the things that he got wrong and some of the things that he got right. In his first recorded statement, Misskelley initially said that he met Damien and Jason at 9 a.m. Later, he said that the killings took place around noon and that the 3 victims had skipped school that day. In the second recorded statement, Misskelley changed the time to 5 or 6, then changed it again to 7 or 8, then added, "I remember it was starting to get dark. In fact, all 3 victims attended school that day and were last seen alive at around 6:30 p.m. Misskelley described seeing Baldwin or Echoes kill the Byers boy by choking him with a large stick. The autopsy showed no evidence of choking. In his second recorded statement, Misskelley said that Damien and Jason tied up the 3 victims with brown rope. No brown rope was used to tie the boys. The victims were actually tied up by their own shoelaces. Misskelley repeatedly tried to end his story by claiming, "And then I left," only to continue recounting what happened next. Now, Misskelley said he saw Baldwin and Eccles anally raping the Byers and Branch boys, but the autopsy couldn't definitively conclude that despite the dilation, so it can't be 100% conclusive. There was possible evidence of semen present on the clothing of one of the victims, but the water ditch had destroyed much of the DNA evidence. It's most likely some sexual assault took place, but it may not have involved anal rape. Or maybe it did, it's inconclusive. Now, Misskelley confessed to chasing down Michael Moore, who was trying to escape, and bringing him back to the scene of the crime, a statement that would be relevant since Moore was discovered farther away from Byers and Branch, a detail not known publicly at the time. Misskelley correctly identified which boy had been cut on his face, that was Branch, which boy had been cut on his groin, that was Byers, and which boy had not been cut at all, and that was Moore. There were widespread rumors that one victim was sexually mutilated. However, the details of each victim's injuries had not been made public at that time. After Jesse's confession, he would be arrested along with Damien and Jason, and they were charged with the murders of Stevie Branch, Christopher Byers, and Michael Moore. As stated in the last episode, Jesse would be tried separately from Damien and Jason. Jesse would recant his confession. The West Memphis Three pled not guilty. And since there was a worry that the case would be branded as an example of satanic panic, the trial was moved over an hour away to Corning, Arkansas, in order to give a better shot at seating, fair and unbiased juries for Jesse. And then it'll be Jones, I think it's Jonesboro for Damien and Jason. So on February 5th, 1994, Misskelley was convicted by a jury of one count of first-degree murder and two counts of second-degree murder. The court sentenced him to life plus 40 years in prison. So after conviction, something interesting happened. Deputy John Moody wrote a letter to Chief Inspector Gary Gitchell. I'll try to read this the best that I can, but the writing it's just not exactly well written. But I'll do my best to read it clearly. Maybe even try to clean up some of the grammar mistakes. I'll do my best. So the letter reads, on the afternoon of February 4th, 1994, Deputy James Lindsay and myself were transporting Jesse Misskelley to the Arkansas Department of Corrections at Pine Bluff. Jesse was asked if there was anything he wanted to say, and after being assured we would not use anything he said against him in court, he chose to talk. Jesse advised he had received a call from Jason Baldwin asking him if he wanted to go to West Memphis to get some girls. Jesse, Damien, and Jason met at a local road on May 5th, sometime that evening. Jesse claimed that he had been drinking Evan Williams whiskey that Mrs. Hutchinson had bought him, and Jason and Damien, they were drinking beer. It was also stated that they had smoked 2 marijuana joints that afternoon. Jesse said that he had known Jason Baldwin since the 6th grade and did not know Damien that well, but that Damien would drink human blood, remembering a time when Jason was bleeding and Damien took some of the blood with his finger and licked it off. Jesse stated that Officer Callahan had lied in court about not seeing him on May 5th. Jesse claims they had a short conversation. After all of them were meeting on the road, the 3 boys walked into the woods and were sitting in the water with Jason and Damien going under. Jesse said he could not go under because of his ear problem. The 3 young boys were seen from a distance when Damien told Jesse and Jason to hide. Jesse said they were hiding behind bushes when Damien grabbed Michael Moore. The 2 other young boys started hitting Damien, trying to help their friend, and that is when Jesse and Jason jumped out and helped Damien beat them. Jesse advised he helped hold them and beat them, but had no part in raping and killing them. Jesse advised 2 of the boys were raped from behind before and after they were tied up, and that Damien and Jason were taking turns with the 2 boys. Jesse said the boys were still alive at this time. Jesse said the boys were kept quiet by putting hands over their mouths, and that Jason and Damien had used shirts and that faces were pushed down to the ground. Jesse was asked how the boys were kept under control while being raped and not tied yet, and he stated, they were like puppies. When you whoop a puppy and tell it to stay, it will. Jesse did say he had to catch Michael Moore, but did not say at what point. Jesse claims that the 3rd boy was never raped, but that he may have been the one that Damien took his penis and put it in his mouth, the young boy's penis. Jesse said at one point Damien and Jason had one of the boys in a headlock, with one he believed had his penis in the boy's mouth while the other one had from behind. Again, this is where sometimes the writing doesn't become very clear. Jesse said he did not mention the ears to the police, only the headlock. Jesse also mentioned that sticks had been used to beat the boys. At one point, Jesse said that Jason had a buck-type locking knife and cut it off and threw it in the weeds, in which I'm assuming they're talking about the scrotum and the skin of the penis of one of the boys, saying the boy was alive and tied at this point, and that he was surprised blood did not get on him, and because blood went everywhere, and he was about a car length away. Jesse said they threw him into the water, and he was still squirming around in the water, at which point he left. Jesse said he does not know what happened to the knife. Jesse said he believed that the other two boys were not conscious when he left, but were not in the water. Jesse also stated that Jason called him later and asked him why he left, and he told them he could not watch it any longer. He claims the only other contact with Jason and Damien were a couple of times at the skating rink, but that they were mad at him. And here's some other information that was shared. Jesse claims his lawyer asked him if he was innocent, and he said that he lied to him. Jesse said he lied about the brown rope to trick the police and to see if they were lying. Jesse says he feels that Damien and Jason tricked him into what he did. Jesse claims he felt sorry for what happened and talks as if he wants to testify against the other boys so that they will not go free, which later he decided not to do. Jesse did say one of the photographs shown to him in the interrogation was a group picture of the boys riding their bicycles in front of a house. The claims made by the officers would be validated by Jesse again on February 8th and February 17th of 1994. Here's something Jesse said to one of the prosecutors, Brent Davis, about why he lied. And this was an interview done on February 17th, 1994. So Jesse Misskelley tells Brent Davis, "We tied him up." Davis responds, "Okay. Now, you said before when police asked you in their statement and asked you what they were tied up with, and you said they were tied up with rope." Jesse answers, "I made that up." And Davis asks, "Why?" And Misskelley responds with, "Try to get off, get him off track." Jesse confessed to his own attorney, Dan Stidham, in February of 1994 twice. Against the advice of his attorney, Jesse would also confess to the prosecuting attorneys without any deal of any kind. When asked why, Jesse said, "I want something done about it." The confessions he makes to his attorney under his own free will is pretty well detailed and uncoursed. In total, Jesse confessed to police, his attorney, and the prosecutors a total of 6 times. These dates include June 3rd, June 11th, and August 19th of 1993, and February 4th, February 8th, and February 17th of 1994. And those are just the official documented and recorded confessions. There's speculation he may have confessed more, but just not substantiated, so I don't really want to go into it. Now, Jesse stated repeatedly to police in confessions that he felt sorry for his role in the murders of Stevie, Michael, and Christopher. Jesse said he cried multiple times due to the overwhelming amount of guilt, and his statement would be corroborated by his father's at the time girlfriend, Lee Rush. So, shortly after police arrested Jesse Misskelley Jr., law enforcement went to Jesse's trailer with a search warrant. Lee told several officers that when she would wake up at night several times to Jesse crying loudly. This is what she said in her own words. "I knew that something was wrong. A few nights ago, little Jesse was in his room crying so loud and sobbing so hard that it woke me up. I went in and asked him what was wrong. His reply was that his girlfriend was moving to Florida." Now, Lee Rush wasn't buying that, and for good reason. It should be noted that Jesse Jr.'s girlfriend, Susie Brewer, she didn't move to Florida. Just didn't happen. It was a lie. And it shows correlation between Jesse's crying, after the murders to Jesse listening to Aaron's recording. If you watch the first Paradise Lost, you can feel the tension between Lee Rush and Jesse Sr. Jesse Sr. was sticking with his son, right or wrong, where Lee felt that if he was found guilty, he wanted nothing to do with him. She expressed she would feel the exact same way if it were her own son. Shortly after this was filmed, the relationship with Jesse Sr. and Lee Rush came to an end. In addition to Jesse Jr.'s multiple confessions, he would also have no credible alibi during the time frame of the murders. In fact, Jesse Jr.'s alibi changed, if not by his own account, then by his father, Jesse Sr. Jesse Sr. was interviewed by news reporters days later after his son's arrest. A reporter from KAIT TV asked him if his son could have been with Damien and Jason on the night of the murders. Jesse Sr. stated that was a possibility, but that his son didn't murder anyone. Jesse's father would later claim that his son was actually at home and remembered seeing him at 7:15 p.m. that night as his son was preparing to go wrestle. The timing of Jesse Sr.'s statement was challenged by his teacher, Gloria Wilson, at the alcohol safety class he attended for DWI violations. According to the teacher, class didn't get out until at least 15 minutes to 8, making it impossible for Jesse Sr. to have seen Jesse Jr. at 7:15 p.m. There was also a wrestling alibi that would also be proven false. Fred Revell, pro wrestler, gave a detailed account of what happened on the day of the murders. He claimed Jesse was with the wrestling crew that evening. One piece of detailed statement that would debunk that claim involved a check and a receipt. Fred stated that he had to give $300 to a man named Charles Stone for a wrestling ring he purchased. Fred claimed he wrote the check on May 5th of 1993, the day of the murders, and he was given a receipt and that the check was deposited the next day. That's what Fred said, but the receipt was actually dated April 27th, a little over a week before the murders. Now, another piece of crucial information involves the Evan Williams whiskey bottle. Jesse claimed he was drinking Evan Williams whiskey on the evening of the murders. It played an important role in the case to substantiate Jesse's involvement. Jesse told his attorney, Dan Stidham, that after the murders, he was mad at what Damien and Jason did to the three boys, especially when he witnessed them mutilate Christopher. Jesse stated after he left, he smashed that Evan Williams whiskey bottle on an overpass between Walmart and Lakeshore out of anger. Here is a statement by prosecutor Brent Davis during the Eccles-Baldwin hearing on February 22, 1994. To quote Mr. Stidham, I believe at the time, if we can find a bottle like he says, then that will convince me that it happened. At 9:30 or 10 at night, we drive. At 10 o'clock in the evening, we proceed, the four of us, to roam underneath the overpass of West Memphis, and lo and behold, find a broken bottle in the location indicated by his client, which of course is Jesse. We then take the bottle to a local liquor store, where we proceed to spend the better part of an hour matching the bottle with certain items. And lo and behold, it matches the brand name bottle Mr. Stidham had indicated that we should be looking for in the first place. At that point, Mr. Stidham says, that wasn't good. It just wasn't good enough to convince him. Additional efforts were made. There was a week hiatus where there was no contact apparently. Jesse stated that Vicky Hutchinson bought him the bottle of Evan Williams whiskey on the day of the murders, and this would be verified by Vicky herself. Jesse would confess, recant, and reconfess several times before and after his trial. Ultimately, Jesse decided he was not going to testify at Damien and Jason's trial. So why would Jesse recant? It's not uncommon, actually, especially when you weigh what the right thing to do is versus freedoms and self preservation. Ted Bundy confessed to over 100 murders but later recanted. John Wayne Gacy would also confess to murders but later recanted. Murderers have a tendency to do what is in their best interest, or why else would they go to trial? And if found guilty, why would they appeal? Jesse's recantment is not grounds for innocence. So let's talk about Jesse's low IQ score. So Jesse's low IQ score of 72 is often brought up to prove that he was tricked into confessing. Jesse's defense team gave him an IQ test and tried to depict Jesse as borderline mentally retarded. It would be noted that Dan Stidham was upfront about the test and how a lower score could be beneficial to his client's case because it could possibly remove a death penalty sentence. Part of this discussion can be seen on Paradise Lost, the childhood murders at Robin Hood Hills. It's not out of the realm of possibility to assume that Jesse could have tried to score poorly on purpose, something brought up during Dr. William Wilkins' cross-examination, the doctor who scored Jesse. Jesse's IQ score may not even reveal borderline mental retardation at all, but instead a lack of effort on his part. In Maura Levitt's book, Devil's Knot, page 70, Jesse stated that he did poorly in school and dropped out because he simply didn't care anymore. He figured he would be a mechanic like his father. What Jesse lacked in higher learning, he made up for in street smarts, especially when it came to understanding his Miranda rights. It all came down to what Jesse wanted to learn. You have to have a skill and knowledge to fix a car. I mean, it takes learning. So in conclusion, it is without any doubt that Jesse Misskelley is guilty based on the solid circumstantial evidence and the direct evidence of his confession. The alibis made by Jesse, his father, and friends have been proven false to presumably try and protect him. Jesse placed himself at the crime and he had no reliable alibi. And even though he wasn't initially truthful about all the details, he would later offer relevant insight to what happened that only those who were there would know. We probably won't ever get to see the entire puzzle, but we at least see enough pieces to know what the picture is. Jesse minimized his involvement, and we won't know how much he truly participated in, but we do know he participated in beating those boys, those poor boys, and he chased and got Michael Moore back. He only confessed and wanted to do something about it after he was interrogated by police and after he was convicted. While this part is not directly linked to the murders, it does show how Jesse is capable of hurting children. I want you to hear this. In March 1993, Jesse was arrested for punching Tiffany Danielle Allen, a 13-year-old girl, in the face. In a statement given after his arrest to the West Memphis Police Department, Dennis Carter, a friend of Misskelley's, reported an incident in which Misskelley chased down a 6-year-old girl, striking her in the head with a rock. That poor little girl cried while Jesse laughed. But this is the guy that the West Memphis 3 advocates want you to think is innocent and was tricked into a confession. Yeah, okay. In the next episode, we will cover Damien Eccles. So until next time, be safe out there and be good to each other.